Hi everyone, and welcome to my Procreate demo for a new pink hair girl. So some of you who followed my work know that I did a Kickstarter a little bit ago on pink hair girls, and I haven't done one in over a couple years, and I figured it was a nice little comfort spot to get to in order to try and do a fully rendered, no lines piece. So I started by sketching it. I did the whole thing in Procreate, so the whole thing would be captured. So I just did a super rough sketch, and now I'm going in with sort of a heavier brush and doing a slightly cleaner version. I didn't make anything really clean at all. This is the exact same way that I did a lot of the stuff for the Pink Hair Girl book, because I knew that I was going to go to such tight render that I knew that the lines didn't have to hold up or support the picture in any way. So you can see me making a couple adjustments to the eyes. There was actually a big break in me starting to sketch this and then stepping away from it and working on it again like by a day. So now I'm just going in and doing my usual method of blocking in the shapes. You can see too there are times where the brush doesn't seem to fill in the whole area solidly, and then it suddenly does, and all I'm doing there is duplicating that layer and then merging it back into itself, because Procreate doesn't have like a really good selection and fill tool like the pen tool in Photoshop, so that's sort of the easiest way for me to do that. One of the things that I always made sure was super sharp when I was working on the Pink Hair Girls of the book is the eyelashes. Other stuff I'll let go fuzzy, but there's just sort of like a loose rule that I set for myself that the eyelashes would be sharp. So I'm really trying to noodle these in here in order to make sure that they're clean. So that was the rest of the eye, then laying in some of the ear, like the gauged ear. And now here I am just putting in the pink for the hair. Now this isn't the exact RGB value of the pink from the book, which was actually something that was somewhat important to me when I was doing the book, because I was actually at one point going to name that book the RGB value of that, but I thought it was like overly artsy and cliched, so that's why I just went with the plain name Pink Hair Girls. So here I put in the pink hair, then put in the headband. Have to do all these things a little bit differently than I would in Photoshop because I was trying to solve it for Procreate. Here I'm going through and fuzzying up the main block in for the skin, so you can see in spots it's getting a little bit fuzzier because I went back in, purposefully wanted to soften it. So now I'm just starting with the skin tones, laying in one after the other. I almost always work from dark to light, but as you've seen in some of the other videos, I have exceptions to that. I probably, if I remember correctly in this, go from dark to light, but then add in like one more dark layer just to pop a couple of spots out. This is the part where it's just sort of the long drawn out process, but at the same time I think this is the most fun. Laying in all the flats can sometimes just be tedious because there's very little, I don't know, skill in that part, and it's just more mechanical, and this is where I'm actually going in and trying to do the more artsy fun part of the whole thing. So you'll see, I mentioned this I think in the previous video, you'll see there are times where like I'll lay something in like the bridge of that nose. You may want to rewind and go back and check it out again, but I lay it in and then it gets knocked back. That's because even though it's all going to end up being one layer eventually, this level of skin tone, I'm painting in a section, creating a new layer, painting in another section, creating a new layer, and then that way I can erase away from it and manipulate the values of the opacity of that layer as much as I want, and then I can go back in and merge all those together. So at the end of the process, each section of the piece, like say the face, the hair, the eyes, those all have their separate layers, but as I'm actually doing each individual level of those layers, I'm actually creating sort of sub layers that I'm then collapsing into themselves, which I know that sounds like really confusing, and I hope it's not that confusing, because it's really not when you see it in practice. It basically just means I'm creating a bunch of layers that I hope to then collapse later, so that I have more control over those individual layers. Now, because this is done in Procreate, and there is a layer limit in Procreate, not everything in here made it all the way to the final finished piece, meaning in my other PSDs that I have, you can sort of pull apart all the layers and you can look at everything that I did there, but these, because of that layer limitation, I had to duplicate the file so that I could have those layers to go back and work to, but then I had to merge stuff down. Since I work in a lot of layers, having a limit of like 31 layers isn't good enough for me, because I usually have like 200 layers or so. The cool thing is Procreate can export a PSD, so what I can actually do is that I can export all of these individual Procreate files as PSDs and merge them all into one big master file. So unfortunately I talked over a lot of what I did there. So I did some lip stuff, which is just multiply layers adjusted and desaturation layers adjusted. The blush is just a standard layer that's a pink and then it's brought down in opacity. The freckles are like a light tan that are then set to multiply, and then I adjust the opacity. And then right there I threw a white add layer on top of the skin just to brighten it a little bit. Now I'm going in and doing all the eye work. You could see that little yellow flicker when the eye first got put in, and that was that same circle that I used on the moon piece for the moon in the zombie piece that I previously posted. Went in, did the glints, did the shine, did some extra reflection stuff, and now I'm going in and refining the hair, adding the gradient, adding some of the bloom. Now I just quickly painted in all of the metal and adding little bounce light to the metal. And now here's just sort of my overall rim, especially since all the pink hair girls are set against white. Just going in and putting like a really bright rim just works out really well. Sometimes we do that in art just because we're going for something really stylistic, and this it actually just works out because she's surrounded by white. And then that's just a quick shadow layer to try and make one side of the face darker. And now here's the process that when I was doing the Pink Hair Girl book was always the most complicated, and I never intended it to be, is putting the tattoos on the girls ended up making it so that it was like doing 2 illustrations every time. Now this was just done with a multiply. Everything on here is multiply with a decreased opacity and then like a slight blur just to try and badly fake that they're slightly faded. So that's the Pink Hair Girl piece. Thanks for watching, and please hit subscribe if you enjoyed. If you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.